Hi everyone, welcome back to session 3 of our Supporting Struggling Readers at Home. I'm Natalie.
I'm Kim. And today we're going to start with a little review from our previous session. We discussed the difference between phonemes and graphemes. Phonemes are the sounds that a letter makes. And the little reminder hint is that when you speak on the telephone, you only have the sound as a point of reference. Graphemes, on the other hand, are the printed symbol or the letter represented by each sound. The other term that we discussed with you in our last session was phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is a very broad term that means oral language skills, and it is the foundation of reading and a very important skill for your children to develop. Phonemic awareness is one of the elements of phonological awareness, and phonemic awareness is the ability to manipulate and identify single units of sound.
Code packs. So today we're going to be talking about blending and decoding and encoding. So we're going to start to be using those code packs we taught you in session 2. So our code packs are our code to the English language. So these are where we have all our graphemes and all of our phonemes that are associated with those graphemes so that we can start working with our children and students and start developing those skills that they need to read. And so today we're going to start to bring those pieces together for you. We're going to talk about blending sounds. We're going to talk about decoding sounds, which is the process of taking the different sounds and pulling them together to read a word. And we are also going to talk about encoding, which is the process of spelling. So taking those sounds and putting them to print. So to begin with, we're going to share with you some different tools and strategies that you can use at home or in your classroom to blend sounds.
The first is going to be an old-fashioned strategy or old-fashioned game. Some of you may have blocks at home. I've got some blocks here, and some of the activities I do with my students is to blend the sounds. So we would start with a single sound such as B, and then we would have the second sound, which is ah. And slowly you would have the student or your child blend and slowly put the sounds closer together. B, ah, b, ah, ba. And then you would change the sound, perhaps change the A to a different sound. Maybe eh. So b, eh, b, eh. And slowly blend the sounds together. So that is one strategy you can use. Another strategy that a lot of children seem to enjoy is using magnets. And these are just simple cookie sheets that we got at the dollar store. And these are some magnets that I have in my classroom at school, and they are accessible and you can buy them at Dollarama. So one of the strategies that we use, I have the children say the first sound or the initial sound, p, and then the second sound, eh. And then they would slowly blend the sounds together, p, eh, p, eh, pe. And if they're able to blend 2 sounds together, we might try blending 3 sounds, p, eh, and then we might try the T. T. We would slowly bring it together. P, eh, t, p, eh, t, pet. And then if they're able to do that, then we might change the initial sound. So we would remove the P and try the letter L. And we would move them apart a little bit and slowly start with 2 sounds. L, eh, le, le. And then we would try a third sound. L, e, t, l, e, t. And then we can continue this with various other sounds. We can change the E for the letter A. And we can go l, a, t. And again, just a reminder that structured literacy is a multi-sensory activity. So you want them to be touching the letters as they're doing it, saying the sounds, and obviously they can see the letters too. So l, a, t, l, a, t, lat. So blending those 3 sounds together. And if the 3 sounds is too difficult, we would remove one of the sounds and just go back to 2 sounds. L, a, la. and moving them and manipulating them helps.
And this may not be an actual word when you see the word lat, for instance, but it is a syllable that could be part of other words. So don't be worried about having your children or students blend nonsense words, because these are parts of other words. Latitude. So they're going to need to know lat to be able to read the word latitude. So we can work with those parts of words as well, instead of just working with real words.
All right. So that is one of the strategies. We also have, it's a similar idea, but we also ideally would have the magnets in lowercase letters. I just demonstrated one with uppercase letters. The lowercase letters are great because we do use the lowercase more frequently. Third strategy that we have, it's called a syllable flipbook. And a syllable flipbook is a great tool that I use with my students, and they can practice it at home. And simply put, a flipbook consists of 2 letters. On the left, I have the consonant, and on the right, I have the vowel. And in the flipbook, I have a series of different consonants. I have all the consonants of the alphabet. And so we can manipulate the different syllables by turning the pages in the flipbook. So we're going to do a little demonstration so that you can see how to use and make a flipbook at home. So Natalie, we are going to practice 2 sound syllables. So 1 syllable with 2 different sounds. Are you ready?
Ready. You always want to make sure that your learner is ready as well, and that they understand the instructions clearly. That's very important, because otherwise they may give you wrong information or they may be distracted. So always do a check-in to make sure that they're ready to go forward.
First syllable.
B, a, ba.
Excellent. Now we're going to change the first sound.
D, a, da.
Excellent. Can you think of a word that has the sound da in it?
Dad.
Excellent. Next syllable.
A, fa.
Well done. We're going to change the initial sound one more time.
L, a, la.
Excellent. And can you think of a word that might have the syllable la?
Lad.
Excellent. Now we're going to change the second sound in these syllables. Well, we'll start with the first sound or the first syllable that you read.
Ba.
We're going to change the second sound. Do you remember what this sound says?
E. B, e, be.
Well done. Can you think of a word that has the syllable be?
Bed.
Excellent. And the next one.
B, I.
Okay.
Bit.
Well done. And then finally, well, no, there we go.
B, a, ba.
And then our last vowel sound. Can you please read this syllable for me?
B, a, ba.
Excellent. So that is a great example of a flip book, and kids love to use them and practice them with siblings, practice them for a few minutes before bed. And it's very simple. You can keep it in your purse and practice it anytime.
We're going to show one more example with the flip book, just to give you a little bit of an intro about the 2 different vowel sounds that are most common. So I just ran through the syllable book with the short vowel sound. So our short vowel sounds are a, e, I, So a like apple, e like edge, I like itch, like octopus, and like up. Alternatively, you may have been looking at that flip book and wondering why I possibly didn't say bay, bow, buy, bee, and boo. And that would be because those are the long sounds. So when we teach reading to children, we typically start with our short sounds because they are the most common and they're the most recognizable in a word, and they follow very simple patterns. Long sounds have some different dynamics to them that change as you progress. But we're going to show you a quick demonstration with the long sounds so that you know the differences and you can work with your children or students that way. Start with your short sounds and then move on to your long sounds. So long sounds of vowels are the sounds that the letter makes when we say their name. So A, E, I, O, U. Those are our long vowel sounds.
All right.
So if we were using our syllable book, we'll do a very quick demonstration as we've already done this, but we would read B, A, bay.
Can you give me an example?
Baby. B, E, B. B, I, buy.
Such as bicycle.
B, O, bow. B, U, bew. So you can work with both vowel sounds when you're working on your syllables, and you will start with your short vowel sounds and then move on to your long vowel sounds. Another tool that is really great is using our code packs to blend sounds. So if you don't have any of these other tools, you can still use your code pack if you've created your code pack. And we did this with cue cards, but really, you can make them with paper, you can make them with cardboard. You don't have to have any specific type of paper. The cue cards are going to hold up better in the long term, but if that's not an option for you, for sure just use paper and work with them that way. So I'm going to do a quick example of how you can start to use your code pack to blend words and sounds together. So I'm going to put these. This is a little bit of a whiteboard. It has a little edge in it. You don't need this. We're using this solely for your purposes so you can see. This can be done on a table. It can be done on your cookie sheet. It can be done on some sort of stand if you have that available. In a classroom, it can be done on the ledge of your whiteboard with large cards even, so they can be even larger. So I'm going to put a vowel sound in here inside my little ledge. And I'm going to I'm going to start with one consonant. So then I'm going to ask Kim, what are the sounds?
B, E.
Now blend them together.
Be, be.
And if Kim has succeeded and mastered that, I may add an additional consonant or sound on the end. And so I may have her start again. Okay, Kim, let's try again. So let's do the first two sounds, blend those together.
B, E, B, E, be.
Now we're going to add the T on the end.
Bet, bet.
Bet. And again, if she were having difficulty and couldn't put that T on, I would go back to the 2-syllable sounds. I may also model this process for her. So I may initially say, okay, Kim, let's do this together. B, E, be.
B, E, be.
Now I'm going to add the T on. B, E, t, bet.
B, E, t, bet.
And you want to have the students or children moving their hand along. Again, that's that multisensory aspect. So they're using their eyes, they're touching, they're feeling, and they're speaking it. So you want to have them moving their hands and sliding along as they're reading the words initially in the process of this. So then I may end up changing some of this. Okay, Kim, we're going to change our B and we're going to put in our G. What sound does G make?
G.
G. And E?
E.
And T? T. Okay, so let's blend our G and E.
G, E, G.
Now we're going to add on the T.
G, E, T, get.
Great. We may change our final sound. Okay, let's try again. So we've changed our T. We've now put in, what letter is this?
B.
What sound?
B.
Okay.
G, E, B. G, E, B. Geb.
Awesome. Now we're going to change our vowel sound. Do you remember which letter in here is our vowel sound?
The middle.
The middle one.
E.
Eh. Awesome. So we're going to change our vowel sound and we are going to change it to this one. What is this letter?
A. Letter A says A.
Ah. Awesome. Okay, so let's start again. So let's start with this sound and this one. So
G, A, Ga.
okay, and now we're going to add in our third.
G, A, B. Gab.
Awesome. And you can start to work with this with more advanced skills as well. If you have students that are, if this might be too simple, then you can start adding on some of our digraphs, which are our 2 letters that make one sound. I'm going to try and find one here. Let's say we have TH. We could add that on as well, and it would be gath. And we would continue to work that way through it with starting to get with more complicated sounds and digraphs. So that's another method that you can use your code packs for to help blend sounds and create words. Next up, we're going to talk about decodable texts. So one of the most useful and important tools of learning to read is books and text and print. And often when we read books in schools or that we get sent home from school or that are in our library, a lot of those books are what we call leveled books. And what that means is that a publishing company has decided that these books are meant for children in grades 1 to 3. You've probably seen those books at the library or in the bookstore when you've been out, and it'll say, it'll make a suggestion on the back or the front of the grade levels that are most appropriate for the books. Unfortunately, those books can be really challenging for our struggling readers because they rely on a lot of the cues and systems that we mentioned in our first session that aren't very reliable and aren't very helpful for our struggling readers. So they rely on pictures to help children learn words, and they rely on looking at the context, which we know isn't very helpful for our struggling readers. So we want to use what we call decodable text. And what that is decodable text is a text that is completely decodable. So if the child is reading that text, they know all of the sounds. They have mastered all of the sounds in the word, in the sentence, and in the paragraph or the book. And that seems like it's really complicated, but it's actually something that you can do at home, that you can create for your child, or as a teacher, you can create for your students. It does require a little bit of forethought when you're going to be working with your children, but it doesn't have to be overly complicated. So I'm going to show you an example of how we can start building decodable texts. Can you hold that? Thank you. So I've created a quick little example here. If you can see, can you bring it up a little closer? So I'm working with certain sounds here. So we don't have that many. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So not that many sounds. So that's 11 letters in the alphabet. So if your child or student has mastered 11 sounds, and these ones in this example, you can start to build decodable text. So up here, you can see that I have the letters and I've got those slashes on it. So the slashes represent the sound. So these are not letters, these are sounds up here. And so what I've done is I've created words and phrases in this case, using those sounds. And you can see at the top, I have a little mark underneath on top of the vowel. And what I've done just to show you is that this represents a short vowel sound. And if I were to have put the line, it represents a long vowel. You do not need to know this. I just wanted to explain that for you for your reference. So when you are building your text, I have a, I, and e. And then I have s, p, t, b, d, and n. And so then I started creating words with the sounds. We have to be careful that we're not using the letter when we're doing this, because I could easily use the letter A and the sound A to make a lot of words. But if my student or child has not learned the sound A and they've only learned the short vowel sound A, then it's not going to be helpful. So when you're creating your words, listen for the sound in the word and don't look for the letter. So I've created a bunch of words. As you can see, there's actually probably about 100 more that I could have created using these 11 sounds. So I have at, sat, pat, bat, nat, nap, sap, it, pit, sit, bit, knit. I could go on. And so what you do is you create your word list, and then you can ask your child or student to start reading it. and they can start reading these words, and they're going to feel a lot of success. Even if you start with the two sound words first, so you can start with at, it, up. Have them read those, they start to see success. Then you introduce your third sound, sat, pat, bat, hat, nat, and you can go on. And so they've mastered that. Once they've moved beyond the words, you can start to introduce phrases or sentences and paragraphs. So I've done a quick example here of some phrases, so I could have them read in tub, in bed, Ted in bed, nap in den. And so these are simple phrases that they can read using these 11 sounds, and I've created it myself, and we can work on them together, and they can start reading right away. They can start decoding as soon as they've mastered some sounds. You really don't need that many. You could probably start with 4 to 5 sounds and start building words and short phrases. And then you move on to sentences and paragraphs. So those are decodable texts. You can also Google decodable texts. There are many publishing companies that create decodable texts. Each company will have its own scope and sequence, which means that it will have a list of prior knowledge and sounds that are required to read that book. So if you choose books, just be careful, even when you're looking for decodable texts, that you're choosing books that your child has mastered the sounds. So automatic, 2 seconds, they recognize the sound is what we want them to be able to do. And so you can choose books where they've mastered the sounds. You should have received, or you will receive, a resource document, and in that document will be a list of companies that create decodable texts. Okay, next up we have a little activity for you. Do you want to do that?
Okay, so here is a sentence, and we are asking you to draw a picture of something. So we're going to give you a second. Can you read what we would like you to draw a picture of? Draw a picture of your...
It's very clear.
Can anyone read what we have asked you to draw a picture of?
Come on, guys.
Natalie?
Draw a picture of your favorite tree.
Close, Natalie. Very close. If we sound it out, et, what does that sound like?
Favorite.
Well done. Now, take a look at this word here. We look at the ch or the ch, and we think of the ch. But there's another sound that sounds very similar to ch. Can anyone think what it might be?
It comes from a very similar place in your mouth.
Our mouth forms the same movement for the sound ch as it does t. So if you replace ch with t, what could this word be? Tree. So we're asking you to please draw a picture of your favorite tree. So we're going to talk a little bit about why this child may have spelled favorite this way and the word tree this way with the letter CH.
Okay, so last time we touched briefly on voiced and unvoiced sounds. So we talked about the th and th, which the th is unvoiced and the th is voiced. And in this example, we can see that right here we have the word favorite, and F is a voiced and unvoiced sound. So when we make the F sound, that is our unvoiced version. When we turn on our voice and hear the vibrations in our throat and make the same sound, we have a V. And so in this example, the child heard they did actually hear the right sound. They just weren't turning their voice on. So when they went to write the word, they didn't recognize that they needed the voiced version instead of the unvoiced version. So this is actually a really great phonetically spelled word for a child that just has a little bit of an articulation problem and probably hasn't been taught the difference between and v. And so it's important that we teach that to our children or teachers, especially our children or students, teachers, you too, if we want them to be able to recognize the difference between certain sounds, because it does create a problem when they are trying to encode and write out words if they are not articulating the sounds properly. And the same is true with the CH, as Kim pointed out, that ch and t. If you look at my mouth, ch, t, they look very similar. And so the child is hearing the sound coming out of the same spot. Often it can be really helpful to use a mirror to have your child see what the sound looks like and where it's coming from. So if you sit side by side with your child or student and have a mirror and you model the sound and where it comes from, and then have the child repeat it, they're going to be able to distinguish the difference. It is also sometimes helpful, and I don't have my example here, but you can create using PVC piping little phones. So if you have, or you probably, if you have PVC piping, you make it look like in the shape of a U. And what you do is you have them speak into the phone. So it would look like that, and they would speak into it, and they could hear themselves making the sounds. And often when they hear themselves speaking, they can distinguish those ch and t sounds, and they can hear it more clearly. So that's a really great strategy. You could also record them. You could record them with your iPhone or with a recorder and then play it back to them so that they can hear the sound that they're saying, and turn up the volume really loud so that they can distinguish it.
All right, so we're going to talk to you a little bit about word lists and patterns. Specifically in the last session, we spoke to you about rhyming, and rhyming is the understanding that the ending sounds are the same. So one great strategy to help your child with their beginning reading skills is to look at word patterns, or some people call them word families. For example, we've used the ending sound at. So at is one syllable, and we're going, if your child can sound out at, then we're going to start building on that with rhyming words by adding different consonants at the beginning of the word. So you really want to emphasize with your child that you are changing only the beginning sound. And if it's difficult to do this in print, you might want to just go back to doing it orally. And we use the shoulder, elbow, wrist blending strategy before, tap, tap, slide. So if your child's having a difficult time blending these sounds in print, you might want to take a step back and do the blending without the print. But if your child's mastered it without the print, then they should be okay doing it with the print in front of them. So we're going to talk about the word family, or the rhyming pattern at. So the ending sound is at. If we put the sound b in front of at, and it's the initial sound, the word is b, at, bat. Now we're going to change the initial sound, and we're going to change the b to, what's the sound? P, p, at, pat. And hopefully through reading this list, your child will recognize that the at ending sound doesn't change, and that's a pattern with all these words. So then we're going to move on to another rhyming pattern, and that's it. A lot of different words can be made with the rhyming sound it. For example, bit, hit, pit, sit, fit, mit, knit, and wit. And we've spoken to you before about nonsense words, or words that actually don't have meaning. We didn't add any of these to this list, but we can certainly add some nonsense words, because really what we're checking not is for meaning, what is a pit or what is a mit, which is not spelled correctly, but we want to make sure that the child is decoding the words, and that the child understands the sounds, the phonemes for each grapheme. So depending on what the lesson is, or depending on what skill you're practicing at home, you could include some nonsense words in this. For example, yit or lit. Well, lit is a word, but it is definitely okay to include some nonsense words to ensure that your child is able to recognize the spelling pattern.
You can also create spelling patterns if they're having difficulty with end sounds. You could do the opposite. So this might actually read ba, and then you're going bat, bap, bam, ban, bag, and you're going through the opposite where you're changing the final sound instead of the initial sound. And that may be helpful for some students or children as well, depending upon what they're struggling with. Okay, word families, check. And so that brings us to a quick discussion about word lists. Often we see in our children's classrooms, we'll see our teachers or our children reading from word lists. Some of these are called the Dolch list, which is a list of words that students must be successful at depending upon a specific grade. And this goes along with our leveled readers as well. Slightly arbitrary rules that are implemented that are supposed to help children with reading that are actually not very helpful. Our Dolch list is a fabulous example because depending upon the grade level, they don't work with families like they do here. So you may see in grade 1 the word bat and in grade 4 the word rat, which doesn't make a lot of sense because if you've mastered the word bat, then you should be able to master the majority of these, if not immediately, with a little bit of support. So one of the reasons we work with word patterns is because it's a lot easier for students to develop the skills and to move forward. When we start teaching words all over the place arbitrarily, like these word lists do, we end up dismissing some of those patterns that are going to be helpful for our students to be successful readers. And so we want to be leery of when our children come home from school or our teachers are sending home students with word lists that they want them to memorize or to learn by the end of a grade, because for the most part, the words that are in there are not going to help our struggling readers learn to read. They're just going to be memorizing them purely. And if they don't have those memorization skills, then they're going to continue to struggle with those words and we're not going to know why. And the reason is because they're not decodable and they're not being taught using decodable strategies.
And as Natalie said, the decodable or the Dolch word lists are usually only successful for the strong readers. And so the kids who are going to succeed with the Dolch list are those who can memorize and who are strong readers as it is. And unfortunately, some of our dyslexic and struggling readers are not going to be successful, and it's going to really hurt their self-esteem as well. All right.
Okay. Up next, we are going to talk about a strategy that you can use to encode, which means to spell words. So this is our SOS.
Hold it.
Sure. Simultaneous oral spelling. And what that means is we are going to work on words and how to spell them. And so this is a two-person rule. I will actually do it with Kim as an example, but what's going to happen is I'm going to say a word. And so if we were working with some of our, where is my decodable list? If we're working with some of our words, for example, on our decodable list, these might be words that we have our child reading. And so as a result, our next step is once they're reading, we want them to learn how to spell these words so that they can put their ideas to print. And so I'm going to use some of these words with our SOS pattern, and Kim is going to go through it with us. And so what it is there's 6 parts to it. So Kim, as the student, as the child, is going to look and listen. So I am going to say the word, she's going to look at me, and she's going to listen. She's then going to repeat the word back to me just to make sure that we're clear on what the word is. Especially with online tutoring and stuff going on right now, we really want to be clear with what we're saying, and we want to make sure that they're hearing the sounds properly. Next up, she's going to segment the sounds, which means she's going to use her hand to identify the sounds in the word and tell me how many there are. This is a really critical step because if she's not hearing all the sounds, we have to stop and we can't go on to the next steps because she's missed some of the sounds. And so the next steps won't be successful if she doesn't know the sounds in the word. So then she's going to name the letters. She's going to write the letters down while naming them, and then she's going to read it back herself to check. This is an interesting step at the end. For some students, it will be helpful. For others, it won't be. Some of them will read it back to themselves and recognize that they've made an error and be like, oh, right, I added an E onto the end and there shouldn't be. Others won't recognize it, and that's completely fine. But we do want them to read it back and to go through that process of decoding the word to make sure that they understand the rules that we've taught them about reading so far. Okay, so we will do a quick example. I'm going to give Kim the whiteboard here and a whiteboard marker. And so we're going to just go through a couple words to show you what's going to happen. Kim will make an error in one of them so we can show you how that looks. I typically don't address the error until the end unless it is the segmenting of the sounds, because I really want to make sure they know what the sounds are in the word. Okay, Kim, so we're going to do our simultaneous oral spelling. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So the word is sat.
Sat.
Great. So usually I have a card with, I'm going to show you the card that I have, and you'll receive this in your package. I just wrote it on this because this is laminated and you can't see it very clearly. But I do have a card with pictures, and I will have this handy with me the whole time, and I'll tap out each step so that she knows where we're going next and what to do next. Once we've done this enough, it's almost automatic, but I still like to have the card with me. So Kim, can you segment the sounds for me? So what sounds do you hear in that word?
S, A, T.
Great. How many sounds?
3.
So tell me what letters represent those sounds.
S, A, T.
Great. Write it down. And she's going to say the sounds.
I'm going to do this here. S, A, T.
Now read it back.
S, A, T. Sat.
Great. Next word. Tub.
Tub.
Okay, so segment the sounds.
T, B.
How many sounds?
3.
Great. What letters?
T, U, B.
How many letters?
3.
Write it down.
T, 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 B, B.
So Kim has wrote a D here. So I'm going to ask her to read it back to herself, and I'm going to see if she self-corrects or if I need to support her. Can you read the word back to yourself?
T, D.
Okay, great. Let's fix that, Kim.
Okay.
So if she self-corrects, I ask her to fix it and to write it to fix her error.
B. I forgot I have to move from left to right.
Can you write that word one more time just to solidify that?
T, B. T, B. Tub.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Okay, we're going to go through one more example. And this one, I'm going to ask Kim to make an error. I want you to add an E to the end of the word. So we are going to do the word nap. Can you repeat the word?
Nap.
What are the sounds?
N, A,
Letters?
N, A, P. E.
Okay, write it down. So I did not correct her at that stage.
N, A, P. N, A, P. Nap.
That's a really great try, Kim. This time, though, we haven't learned this rule yet, but when we add an E on the end, it actually makes this letter say its long name. Do you remember the long sound for the letter A?
A.
So if this E helps this letter say its name, can you try reading that word?
N, A, P. Nape.
Great. So how can we turn that into nap?
Maybe take off the E?
Yes, let's try that.
Nap.
Great. Nap. Write it again.
Nap.
Awesome. So that's how you're going to go through your simultaneous oral spelling. Often when I do this with beginning readers, I find that the vowel sounds are very difficult to differentiate in words. So often I see a lot of mix-ups with a and e and ah and So often they'll segment their sounds and they'll go n, e, p. And if that was the case, I would interrupt at that point and I would repeat the word and I would say, the word is nap. Because I really want them to hear the sounds before they move on to the next stage. I'm not going to fix the spelling errors until I get the end, but I really do want them to hear those sounds properly so that they know what they're spelling. And then if it's still unclear, then we'll work on the vowels again and I'll say, okay, our vowel sounds are ah, and be really clear and be really exaggerated with my mouth movements so that they can really hear the sound that's in the word. Because ah and sound very similar when they are in a word like bog, rut. It can be really difficult to distinguish the two sounds. So I really want to make sure that they hear those sounds properly so that then they can name the correct letters and they can spell the word correctly.
And I'm just going to add too that using a word such as nap, we can also bring back that strategy of word families. So Natalie might want to ask me to spell perhaps the word tap. And so she would say, great job with the word nap. How could we turn the word nap into the word tap? So then, of course, we would just change the initial sounds. And I would say, well, the first sound, t, ap. I would add the letter T, T, A, P. And then maybe she would ask me to spell the word map. So again, we're looking at rhyming patterns. And I might put a M, M, A, P. So the spelling patterns using the rhyming patterns is an excellent strategy for spelling.
And it's really going to push them forward and build their confidence because they're going to be reading lots of words and spelling lots of words that they're going to see success with rather than, trying to read and spell words that they have no idea how with no patterns. Once we go with the patterns, it really does change how they feel about the process because they really start to see success. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our session for today with blending, decoding, which is reading, and encoding, which is spelling. I hope those strategies are going to be helpful for you. Next week, we have one more session left. And so we will see you next week for our final session.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.